Hey Tacticians, patch 9.19 is coming out for Teamfight Tactics. I am Phreak. Let's talk about what's going on in the patch. It's actually a very, very big one. So first off, the easy stuff. There's a new champion coming out, Kai'Sa, Void Ranger Assassin. This is the second champion since Gangplank. Kha'Zix, I guess. This is the first champion since Gangplank that has two damage classes, right? Gangplank was a Blade Master and a Gunslinger, meaning that he had two different ways to multiply his damage. Kai'Sa has two with Ranger and Assassin, attack speed and crit chance/damage. She also technically has a third, if you wanted to call Kha'Zix has two with Void and Assassin, because Void's a damage type. She has three. She can deal true damage, gain bonus attack speed, and gain crit. So she is I guess, triple scaling carry. That's a pretty big deal. Also, her spell gives her a bunch of attack speed. Keep in mind, you will never find a 3-star Kai'Sa, so 30 to 60% bonus attack speed for 3 seconds, and gets a decently sized shield that helps her stay alive. Overall, these are pretty solid damage numbers. Putting her at 2-star puts her at pretty decent DPS, around 100-something, which is pretty good. Should be in a generally pretty good spot, but I would say that based on the numbers in my head, 3-star Ashe is going to do more DPS than 2-star Kai'Sa, without getting her other benefits online. With the benefits online, you're there, and that's part of the power level of the character. But that's just kind of the math, just so you know. Pretty standard 20 ranged armor. Okay. We'll talk about every patch change as it comes through. So Sparring Gloves now exists. It's 10 crit chance and or 10 dodge chance. When you build an item out of Sparring Gloves, it'll convert to 20 crit chance or 20 dodge if it's an offensive or defensive item. And if you are double Sparring Gloves or Sparring Gloves plus Spatula, it's just 20 plus 20 because that's how all these items work. Mathematically, before we get into it, 10 crit chance is a very, very weak stat. 10 dodge is a very, very strong stat. So here is, assuming it's fully converted to the offensive side, here's how much damage it's worth, right? If you're a basic champion and your crit goes from 25 to 45%, it is a 9% DPS increase. That is far, far worse than Recurve Bow. Recurve Bow is 20% DPS increase. Recurve Bow is also 20% more mana generation. So Brawler's Gloves is not close on damage. If you're Assassin 3, it's still not as good on damage. It's close. If you're Assassin 6, it's about the same as Recurve Bow on damage, but you're still not getting the mana gain. And when you're Assassin 9, it's really no better than the one before. So Brawler's Gloves are actually not good damage-wise. You do more damage when you hit, but DPS-wise, especially if you consider your spell as valuable, a Recurve Bow is better offensively than Brawler's Glove. So if you like offensive Brawler's Gloves items, it better be for the unique passive because the stats ain't it. They're fine with Assassins, but not otherwise. Dodge-wise, it's awesome. It's 25% more physical durability. That is way better than Chain Vest, and it's not close. Chain Vest also scales linearly, which means it's worse and worse when you're simply a knight with 40 base armor, or a guardian, or have guardian buff on you, or other armor items. The 20 armor means less and less relative to other potential stats, whereas 20 dodge is always 25% more physical durability. Unless you're against 4 wild. That's the only option. So pretty good. So some new items come out. Infinity Edge now exists, and it's 150% crit chance. 20% critical strike chance, new Infinity Edge, right, instead of being out a double BF sword. So this now kind of feeds into the whole, hey, by the way, Assassins really like to do crit stuff. Because you're adding more crit damage, this does make this less bad, but you're still not, I guess you're getting pretty close, right? If you're doing Infinity Edge, okay, now the 20 crit chance is as good as attack speed would be. It gets a little bit tighter, but again, I'm not super enthused about the item in just a pure DPS sense. But yep, this is of course your pretty standard, hey, here's some more damage. Sparring Gloves is Recurve Bow. You put it on someone who is going to die and you just give it to someone else. This is actually really interesting because now you're putting an item on a character you want to int. Throw it on Fiora, let Fiora die. It's going to feel really weird putting this on, say, like, Sejuani, because the first X seconds of the fight, like, first of all, Sejuani doesn't die very quickly. You want to give her things like Guardian Angel. Also, all the time that Sejuani's using repeating crossbow, it's not on your Kaisa or whatever. So you do kind of need to put it on like an Aatrox or like a frontliner who likes the damage, and then also is going to toss it off. Like I'm not sure this item is going to be great because it's almost a little too awkward. But the idea is super compelling, and there's a chance it's amazing. Like, this is the kind of item that's really good in like the first 3 rounds or whatever, because like the first few fights when you only have like 3, 4, 5 units, because you can put it on that frontline Fiora or whatever, and if it goes to Garen, that's okay, because Garen is still a meaningful amount of your damage output in the very early game, even just swinging. Right, and attack speed, what's nice is it's attack speed and crit chance, which is actually great. But attack speed is especially good, because we're going to talk about how crit's kind of garbage. Because even if it goes on to Karthus, it's more spells, and that's still good. So repeating crossbow is going to be good for that reason. That there's almost always a good beneficiary. Jeweled Gauntlet's pretty hype. Your spells can now crit for 1.5x. And this is actually kind of the big deal, right? Because you have a 45% crit chance for 1.5x damage. That's not bad. That's automatically, in and of itself, a like 22% DPS increase. Which means it's basically, this is Needlessly Large Rod. It's essentially 20% or 22% more damage, which means it's essentially Death Cap. If the Death Cap read, your AP is increased by 22%. So it's not as good as Death Cap in that regard, but burst matters, right? Increasing your AP from 40 to 60 is fine, but just doing 1.5x damage, like, tell me if I'm losing you in the math. In my mind, this all makes sense. It is mathematically, in the average case, expected value case, not as good as Death Cap, flat out. And it might never be as good as Death Cap, flat out. But if it's an assassin, if you give this to Zed, if you give this to Katarina, suddenly it's way better than Death Cap. And that's where it comes on, right? Because now the Sparring Gloves are already about as good, and the AP is fine on many of these assassins. That's where it gets really exciting. But mathematically, you should not be looking for a Jeweled Gauntlet over Death Cap. Even if you don't have even if you don't have Sork bonus, this is not better than Death Cap. On expected value for mages. That's the math. I'm telling you that right now. Hand of Justice. You give it mana, and you either do 40% more damage or you gain 40 life on hit. If you get 40% more damage, it becomes crit. If you get 40 life on hit, this becomes dodge. That's my understanding. Honestly, getting 20% dodge and 40 life on hit is really good. This is another good Blade Master item. Interestingly enough, a lot of these items roughly land well with Blade Masters just because they are damage-dealing melee champions who kind of like the durability and kind of like the damage and kind of either build is good. So this is kind of interesting. It's also a solid mana item, which that can just be really relevant on some assassins, right? Again, if it's crit and 40% more damage on an assassin, which is incredible. If it's 40 life on hit, assassins have decent attack speeds all the time. Like, Akali is pretty reasonable here. Iceborne Gauntlet on dodge, create an attack speed slow zone. That's a pretty big deal. This is 20 armor, 20 dodge. Create an attack speed slow zone when it happens. Sejuani is going to be triggering this zone for sure. It's gonna happen. This is a really big deal, and this is, I think, a better item than Frozen Heart. 20 mana is generally, I would say, worse than 20 dodge. Yeah, you'll get your first spell off sooner as Sejuani, but you might get 2 in this case. This is a really big deal. This is hugely big deal. This is, I think, an absurdly good item. Next up is the Quicksilver, which is going to be with the Negatron Cloak. So it's dodge and MR, so it's a lot of durability overall. It's roughly Swordbreaker in that regard, which is not, I know, terribly exciting, but it's still meaningful. And again, talk to me about champions who want to, survive the front line. Blade Masters. When you're crowd controlled, cleanse the CC. 5 seconds between uses, that's not bad at all. So now your frontline Aatrox gets out of the Sejuani stun, that's pretty hype. This is still good on someone like Draven, of course, as well, who wants to survive that Sejuani ult to reach his backline. This is a really, really big deal, because oftentimes it was very difficult to spread out your army enough to dodge Sejuani. That AoE was so big. Now you can kind of guarantee that backline or survive stuff. And honestly, a champion like Draven, who, doesn't super love dodge and doesn't super love MR, if he's in that 1v1 with the Jinx, it's going to be a lot better. The 20 MR is going to help him survive the Aurelion Soul in the backline. And he's not getting stunned, so he can start lifestealing back up. This is, durability sets are not terrible on back range carries either, backline carries either. Trap Claw. Sparring Gloves plus Giant's Belt. On combat beginning, gain a spell shield when it breaks, stun the champ who broke the shield. So this is, of course, again, it will protect you against that CC. So, hey, this is, I would say, the better version of Quicksilver for, let's say, Draven, where Akali jumps you, pops the spell shield, you don't get crit with her spell, he stuns Akali, which is a huge DPS upside for you and a huge durability upside for you. Or Aurelion Soul ults you. Well, don't worry, you spell shielded it, and now Aurelion Soul is stunned. Karthus ults you. Don't worry, that stopped as well. Sejuani ulted, don't worry, it didn't stun you at all. This is incredibly good. Again, it's still not damage output, it's health dodge, but this is a great carry item. Because it's going to block that spell that was probably going to be a really big deal. Double Sparring Gloves is my most excited item. I'm hype about this. I think it's just really cool. It's 20 dodge, 20 crit. We talked about the fact that the dodge is the good part of that. The crit is not. But the item takes all 3 item slots, and on the round begin, you copy 2 random items. I think that's super fun. I enjoy that. Essentially, what's good about it is that it's just more items. And yeah, it can be garbage, right? Like, you can get Tear of the Goddess items on Kassadin. Like, you can get unlucky, but just the idea of creating bonus items, like, I would happily, if the game just gave me the only drops ever were Thieves Gloves, I would happily just equip 6 different champions with Thieves Gloves. I'd be totally down for that, and the expected value on that is great. And this is one thing, by the way, right, is you can mitigate bad RNG by having more of it. The law of large numbers is a real thing. If you equipped every champion with Thieves Gloves, someone's going to get good stuff. And you're still getting dodge, and you're still getting crit, which is okay-ish overall. There's something for everyone there, at least a little bit. Mittens makes a champion a Yordle. Again, it's straight up Sparring Glow Spatula, so it's 20 crit, 20 dodge. Champion is now also a Yordle. Dodge in League where works multiplicatively, so you don't like add 60 dodge to 20 dodge and get 80 dodge. You have a 20% chance to dodge. If you don't dodge there, you have a 60% chance to dodge afterwards. Multiplicatively, it's still 25% more durability to the person you give this to. Of course, they become a Yordle, so they're inheriting Yordle dodge, and they're adding, another 25% durability from the Sparring Gloves plus Spatula. That's pretty hype. We're going to see definitely a lot more Yordles. One of the big things with Yordles, really, was that you had to play Tristana to do it. And it was weird to sit on Tristana for no reason when you weren't sure you're going Yordles, and suddenly you're Yordles, and you're like, well, I got Veigar, Lulu, and Gnar. Am I backtracking for Trist now? That feels pretty bad. But now you can say, well, you know what? I got Kennen, Veigar, Lulu. Okay, I'll add my Sorcerer, and you know what? Yeah, we can probably find 2 more Yordles. So, through that, I think it's pretty cool. And also, like, all the Yordle champions are very good. Like, Poppy's super good, Kennen's super good, Gnar is super good, Veigar and Lulu are just fine. Like, the recent Lulu nerfs made Lulu not absurd, but she's fine. Veigar's fine. They're both Sorks. You're going to get Sork bonus in there. Like, and just find one of these. Find one of these, and your comp's going to come online. I expect to see Yordle comps this patch because of Mittens. Deathblade now also exists. Double BF Sword. Of course, keep in mind, BF Sword got nerfed at previous patch. On Killer Assist, gain 15 attack damage till the end of combat, stacks infinitely. Keep in mind that, like, the infinity case of, like, it's my 8th kill, and now I have 120 attack damage. By the time you've killed 8 champions, you've probably won the fight anyway. So keep in mind, this has no unique passive at all. It does literally nothing but the components, and they're weak components. BF Swords are weak components now, in my opinion. This does inherently nothing until you get that first kill. And you are sandbagging by removing unique passes from your potential builds until you get that first takedown. Now, this is, of course, good on gunslingers. It's good. I would say it's good on AoE Sorks, but of course, you don't really like AoE Sorks. This is not too bad on someone like Volibear, who is gonna AoE a lot and actually scales off AD. In fact, this is probably an ideal item for Volibear. This actually is pretty exciting, in my opinion. That seems pretty fun. But yeah, anytime you can get big gunslinger things to happen, any Blade Master that actually can hit AoE, so champions like Gangplank are not too bad, even though Gangplank is still a lot of a mage. But I think this can be quite good. Also, if you are kind of a hybrid, like if you're a Kali, and you have like Luden's Echo, it's like, well, you'll splash on people, and it's going to be a bit more reasonable, a bit more doable. Varus tends to have really good AoE. If you happen to be a Hurricane user, like if you're Ashe or something, that can work out for you as well. So there's actually some ways this can work, but this feels pretty particular, and I'm not sure it's going to end up being that good of an item. This might need a buff, we'll see. I might just be wrong. BF Sword Recurve Bow gets remade as well. No longer is it the Sword of Divine. It is Giant Slayer, and attacks deal 5% max health as true damage. That is something I did do math on. It averages out to 72 damage on hit, which I believe I essentially did all the math, not only for mean health of a 2-star champion, but also mean armor of a 2-star champion, and basically factoring in what attack damage it would have been. This is worth 72 raw AD, which means Giant Slayer, this is worth 72 raw AD, which, by the way, that's like 5 takedowns. Giant Slayer is essentially objectively better than Deathblade. Just overall. It's just better. So don't make that. Make this. Overall seems to be a good item. Cool. Next up, we have system adjustments. Player damage is going down slightly. Word on the street is people were dying a bit too quickly, so here is the change. Damage before, damage after, damage difference, all the 2 drops, and the 3-star versions of 1 and 3 drops. These are the units that are dealing less damage now, right? Tier 2, Tier 2, Tier 2, 3-star Tier 1, 3-star Tier 3. Those are the ones that are down by 1. There you go. Early to mid-game composition is basically weaker, but yeah. 1 drops mostly not doing less. 3 drops mostly not doing less. Only the gold versions, which of course you did some of, don't get me wrong. But there you go. Okay. Mystery boxes, also some changes. Common box average gold slightly decreased. Well, okay, just decreased. Uncommon decreased very slightly. Gold boxes a bit less often. Tier 4 no longer dropped from uncommon, which is a very good thing, by the way. I'm glad we're not seeing Tier 4 units super early anymore. That was a good thing to get rid of. Having a Kali at first PvP round, a bit XD. So that's a good thing to change. I'm glad that's going away. Otherwise, a bit more Nico's Help, which I think is just kind of hype. I think Nico's Help is a really, really cool item. And just the idea of getting your comp online is the exciting thing, where you're like, no, I really, really want to get my thing. And getting to like invest in your comp, I think, is really cool. So I just like what this does for the fun of the game. Dragon is quite a bit weaker. Here is the math. Basically, instead of taking 1/6 damage, you take 1/4 damage. Here is the math. If you're a Dragon Champion, in all cases, it's 50% more damage taken, right? Taking 3/4 is 50% more than taking, taking 1/4, 50% more than taking 1/6. 50% more damage taken, okay. Automatically, that's the math you care about. But if you really kind of were curious, a Dragon Champion, instead of taking 40% damage, takes 21% damage. A Dragon's Claw Wielder, instead of taking 10, takes 16% because of the 40 extra MR on top. But this is what you're looking at, right? That's the damage taken. It's real low. Glacial is getting a reshape / I would say nerf personally. In general, I will still say that lower duration, higher chance, if the math is equal, is a buff, because consistency is important with things like crowd control, right? Double hitting a stun is quite bad, and when durations are long, you have a very high chance at doubling up really quickly. With lower durations and higher chance, you tend to get the average a bit more often. But the actual math is this. The stun percent, obviously, is higher, the stun duration is lower, and ultimately the total stun amount is down. 25 to 17% overall less stunning, which I believe doesn't make up ultimately for the consistency upgrade. So I would say this is overall a weaker glacial. And hey, they just think it's too powerful, so there you go. Here's the big change. Void is now much like Nobles. When you only have 2, only 1 Void champ gets it. I guess it's more like Imperial. It's actually exactly like Imperial. When you have 2 Voids, 1 champ gets it. When you have all 4, well, when you have 4, there are 5 now, I believe. When you have 4, all the champs get it. This means that if you are playing a Kaisa Void comp, you need to play Cho'Gath and Rek'Sai and Kassadin. Yeah, we were seeing that already, but hey, that's your out. Or, of course, Kassadin is not in. Kha'Zix is in. Now you need a 3rd assassin. Okay, you've got 2 brawlers, 3 assassins. Like, that's already, what? You're at 5 units, and they're already spoken for, right? It's those 4 Void, plus another assassin. Okay, now you want a ranger that's 6. Okay, well, your comp's kind of getting spoken for pretty quickly. It's Ashe. I don't know. Find another thing. Ultimately, I think this change is good. Don't get me wrong. I think it's a good change for the game. And less Void assassins. Yordle dodge chance made slightly weaker in the early game. 3 Yordle is weaker. I think 6 Yordle is worth chasing, of course. But yeah, 3 Yordle going a bit weaker is fine. I definitely think it was going to be pretty scary to just play, we're just going to play Kennen, Poppy plus Mittens on, pick a champion, Aatrox, Gangplank, Draven. Yeah, that was probably going to be a bit too strong overall. So Yordle 3 is weaker. Here's the stuff. This should be red. This should be yellow. But yeah, okay, that's going away. Yeah, basically 14% less overall physical durability when your dodge goes from 35 to 30. Of course, 6 Yordle is unchanged and easier to get, which makes it better. And then Yordle 9, I want to point out, by the way, Yordle 9 requires 3 spatulas and level 9. You have to be level 9. Oh, sorry, you need 3 spatulas or 5 spatulas in level 8. But you need to have 9 units, all 6 Yordles, and then your other 3 units all need mittens on them. Now, if you get it, you have 10 times the physical durability. You probably win the game against every non-sort comp. That is relevant, don't get me wrong. But there's going to be a screenshot of Yordle 9. Almost no one will ever be able to play Yordle 9, which is totally fine with me. It's just, hey, that's kind of cute. All right, so Assassin is getting rejiggered a little bit. The crit damage and crit chance are getting reshaped. Here is that. Assassin 3 is no difference. Assassin 6 does 5% less damage, but 2x becomes 1.9x. And Assassin 9 does 10% multiplicatively less damage as before. So it's also nerfs to Assassin. Again, Assassin 9 is basically irrelevant. You rarely saw Assassin 9, so who cares? Assassin 3 is unchanged. The only thing that matters in this game is Assassin 6 is weaker. And it's 5% weaker. Seems okay. Do want to point out, of course, that Rapid Fire Cannon does not dodge pierce, right? We talked about that in the previous one. Phantom Dancer, you still need Wild 4 to make that all happen. Yeah, small nerf to Assassin. We saw the pretty large nerf to Void. But keep in mind, again, like if we're going to say, like, hey, but what if Void Assassin never left? Well, there were no direct changes to Kassadin, no direct changes to Kha'Zix, no direct changes to Rek'Sai, no direct changes to Cho'Gath. They added another Void unit, which is worth chasing. And they only nerfed Void 6 by 5% damage. It's not that hard to get 4 Void. So, there weren't that many direct nerfs to Void Assassin. Now, we can scroll down and see some stuff, but like up to this point, right, there haven't been very big nerfs to Void Assassin. I do like this change. I do like Ninja's 4x bonus getting higher. I'm generally pretty happy with how Ninja 1 feels. I think those units feel really, really powerful. I like trying to put in Ninja 1. I enjoy that part of the game. I think it's it's a cool thing. but there definitely was not enough payoff for Ninja 4. When your character has 130 attack damage, having 150 attack damage is not very relevant. This is pretty valuable. I can see this going even higher and it would be fine, but I mean, only plus 20 was definitely not worth it. Slight buff to Noble, slight nerf to Shapeshifter, which is good because that was the other really, really strong comp. Slight nerf to Ranger, but there's a bug fix that ultimately makes this, I would say, still a buff to Ranger. Rangers were not getting full power most often. So we have some champion changes. Anivia is gaining 50 health, gaining attack speed, aka mana generation, and the first spell comes off sooner, and she targets the backline carry. This is a pretty big deal. Here's Anivia's health. It's up 7%. That's definitely a thing. But she has 1/3 more attack speed and only needs 3/4 as much mana. Pretty big deal. And even the second ult would come in as fast as the second one would have otherwise. So pretty big stuff right here. Certainly a meaningful reshape. Targeting for this target's a big deal. Certainly Anivia is arguably the weakest 5 cost. Good to see her get some buffs. I like that. Next up, big shifts to Kassadin, attacking slower and dealing less damage, but it has more armor to frontline and more overall mana steal and more overall shielding. So DPS is down substantially. 27% less damage. Kassadin as the assassin, no longer as valuable. Okay, sure, that's somewhat to be expected. He's no longer the carry, sure. Overall physical durability is up 8%. That's the nice stuff right there. And then the actual ability itself, and I believe this is with the attack speed multiplied in, because we're not seeing 20 becomes 25, aka 20%. 25% more power. With attack speed, it's only 15% more power because you're attacking about 10% less often. So still getting 12, 24, well, you were getting 12, 24, 36 more mana and shield per second. You're now getting 14, 28, 41 mana and shield per second. So that's a bump right there. So as they said, more of a frontline tank, less of a damage dealer. I'm cool with that. Misfortune. I know one thing they're talking about because people were really sad about Misfortune not being very good is the design was worried that Misfortune would just simply be Aurelion Soul, right? Attack the backliner, they have basically the same spell. And I like the way they found to try to put Misfortune in a good spot by making her spell really expensive. This requires 15 auto attacks. You are capped at 10 mana gain per attack unless you're a Sorcerer or Elementalist. Then you're capped at 20 mana gain per attack. Now her attack speed does go up, so it's not quite as bad as you might think. But this is still only about a 15% attack speed increase, and it's twice as much mana. Aurelion Soul gains mana much, much, much faster than MF. But if she can make it happen, damage up by a lot, and her targeting is going to be ideal. So this is going to be meaningful. Misfortune is going to gain some power here. Also, just like the raw DPS increase, right? So here's some more health, 7%. DPS up by 12%. Mana generation up by 12% as well. And the spell does half again as much damage. 2,000 damage for 2-star MF. That is worth chasing. That is worth giving her Yumi, finding a couple of sorcerers to put in alongside her, and having her go to town on the opposition. I like this a lot. More follow-up. Mordekaiser buffs. First spell comes off just as fast, but the other spells come off slower. Okay, sure. You don't want her to do more damage because his damage is up substantially. Tristana's spell damage also up a little bit, enough to matter. So here's Mordekaiser's spell damage, 25, 55, 65%. Oof, and yes, I'm rounding. Yeah. I mean, Mordekaiser is finally at, like, reasonable for a 1-star knight durability values. Now that his spell is not a joke, because this is actually enough damage to care about, finally. As long as he can get it off, get 100 mana out and get in there, you might actually care about Mordekaiser now. And you know what? This puts Mordekaiser as a pretty good spot for that, like, mittens transfer over stuff. Here, have some more attack speed. Build your mana up. Get that one bop down. Let him die. Give it over to Kindred. Feels good. The repeating crossbow. Tristana spell damage up decent. Right? Up by 10, 20, 30. Not too bad. Tristana definitely has had better days, seems to need the power level. Keep in mind, there is a new item that is ideal on gunslingers in Giant Slayer, 5% max health true damage. That's really good on anyone with high attack speed and multiple target selection, and that's gunslingers. That's Triss. She has very high range, decent attack frames. Yeah, the spell kind of gets in the way, but now the spell is less garbage. And keep in mind, this spell, right, you do, I think it's like, what, 2.25 times the damage, something like that. So it's actually, you know, solid 300 to 400-ish damage in the real world at 3-star Triss to a decent AoE. Okay, that's not complete trash anymore. Next up, Blitzcrank gets more health, gets more ability damage. Let's look at that. Blitzcrank, 8% more health, feels good, man. Damage output, of course, is the rank 1 of the spell. I mean, 250 is still not a ton. It's there, it matters, it exists. This will definitely help you one-shot that thing. Hey, if you're going to play a double BF sword into, you know, kill things, get resets, you really want Blitz in the comp, well, good thing 1-star Blitz is better here. Also, I really want to point out that 2-star Blitz also still gains 100 damage here, which is quite solid. One of the big things I really like to try to do, and I could almost never make it work, was to play Sork Brawler and have Blitzcrank one-shot people and stack the Blitzcrank because he's going to one-shot the part of this unit, and if they don't position, Draven gets one-shot, and then we build the mana back up, and he one-shots Kennen, and, you know, that was really enticing to me. But you kind of need the 3-star Blitzcrank because the damage was 800. This is enough of a damage upgrade that, you know, maybe it's doable with 2-star Blitzcrank. I'm not saying it's a good comp, I'm just saying it's a fun comp. And this is cool. This helps you get the resets, so... good stuff for Jinx, good stuff for the double BF sword item. Braum, more expensive spell. Rek'Sai, less attack speed. So we didn't put any of those in, I guess, here, but Rek'Sai losing 10% DPS. Again, this is another direct void unit nerf. We saw the casted one earlier. Here's the Rek'Sai one. Braum, I actually am glad there's more of a window between the shield coming up and coming down. There's a little bit more time to damage him before he goes back to invulnerable. Like, it's a good change, personally. I feel that way, so cool stuff there. Next up, Ashe, small nerf, takes a bit more mana. The Katarina damage per tick, that's actually pretty meaningful. Plus 5, 10, 15 per tick is 13 to 19% more damage. Katarina is still designed to be a character that really needs the investment to get off the ground. You really want to give her a bunch of mana, but, you know, maybe we get it in there. Because all you need is her to be strong enough that she does one-shot the enemy team, and now you invest in her. So, you know, we're going to see this come through. It's a possibility. Maybe we'll see it. Shyvana burn damage down by 50, 75, 100. There's the spell damage before and after. That's the strict 20% damage nerf. Still gets most of her health. Keep in mind, Shapeshifter 6 got nerfed, but Shapeshifter 6 wasn't seen all that often. 3 was more common. She's still a dragon. Dragon got nerfed, but it's still very good. But, you know, Shyvana got nerfed in 3 ways this patch, although one of them was not really going to matter very much. Veigar gets 50, 100, 150 bonus damage. That's a pretty big bump right there as well. One of the nice things about Veigar getting buffs like this is it's not just about one-shotting. Just a 2-star Veigar spell in general, 650, only costs 75 mana. He's a sorcerer. You get this out pretty often. Just as raw damage output, pretty valuable. This is a cool thing. You're going to see Yordles more often, right? Because you're going to see that spatula upgrade. That's going to be him looking to knock people down. And being that he's spell damage, people dodging doesn't affect this, so he's going to feel good. Vi gets 50 health. Vi's spell does 50 more damage here as well. 8% more damage, 20 to 8% more spell damage. More Vi. Volibear gets 50 health and a stat reshape of less AD, more attack speed, which makes him essentially get his ult off sooner. Apply on hits like Giant Slayer sooner, and scale off raw attack damage better. So Volibear's health is up by 7%, and his overall DPS is up by a meager 2%. That is strictly a buff, and again, the other thing to talk about, he's going to get his ult sooner. That part matters a lot, and almost 10% sooner. That's quite meaningful. So this is primo stuff for Volibear. Akali, massive attack speed bump right there, 20%. Didn't put the math out. Oh well. 20% more spells, 20% more auto attack damage. Huge bump to Akali. From what I saw, people tended to play Zed over Akali. With the prior ninja buffs from up there, getting all 4 ninjas maybe a bit more common now because, hey, you still want Zed. Zed is great. And now, hey, you know, Akali's looking pretty good. Gnar slightly weaker and even more weaker. with the transform plus the Shapeshifter 6 nerf. So here is Gnar's health down 7%, and then with the transform, it's down 10 to 12%. Here's the health before and after here. Pretty meaningful. I mean, Gnar was like, one of the major carries here. Yeah, big deal. Jinx getting buffed back up, right? Jinx another one who's tended to kind of drop by the wayside. Okay, Jinx getting brought back into the meta. Again, we saw the Blitzcrank buffs, we're seeing Vi buffs, we're seeing Brawler buffs, things that aren't Rek'Sai. Like, hey, let's put the Hextech Brawler count back in, the Gunslinger count back in. Hey, remember Misfortune, she's pretty cool as well. Get you, even if you play just 2 Gunslingers, that's fine. Jinx MF, let's go. Kindred getting buffed and nerfed. More attack speed means their spell comes off faster, which is good. Their DPS is a bit higher, which is needed because Kindred for a 4-drop has crap DPS. This gets a bit closer. But their spell is 1 second less, which it's fine. That's fine. You usually got enough done during the 3 to 4 seconds that you're still pretty happy with Kindred. Good to see Sejuani nerfed. Sejuani, very clearly the best frontliner in the game. Okay, Cho'Gath's debatable because he's Void. But 6% less health, stun duration, even though it's only 0.5 seconds at rank 2, this still matters. And keep in mind, we have Quicksilver and the Spell Shield item coming into the game. Those are going to be really relevant against these, oh, my first spell means everything champions. Next up is Swain, who was the king of shapeshifters. I mean, we're seeing both the trait for Shapeshifter 6 going down, but also strict nerfs to the shapeshifters. We saw Shyvana, we saw Swain, we saw Gnar, Elise, literally. Stay tuned for Elise, by the way. It's spicy. Yep, Swain gets less damage. Swain gets less healing. And Yasuo, one of the slightly underperforming 5-tops, I would agree, goes up. So here's Swain's damage, down 20%. Healing, down 25, 14, 10%. Sure, okay, whatever. Yasuo, 7% more health. Okay. As we mentioned, Dragon's Claw the same. Frozen Heart buff by 5%. IE is down to only 150 crit damage. Okay, whatever. Rapid Fire Cannon no longer gives attacks can't be dodged. It is now only on Wild 4. Whew, that's a big deal. Titanic Hydra, instead of 10% max health in a splash, it is 3% max health to the 3 units. The target and the 2 right behind. Those 3 things. I guess you're hitting fully sideways, which is really unlikely. You might hit 4. Whatever. You get like the strictly sideways and the 2, whatever. Basically, this is essentially, it feels like a reliability up for Titanic. A bit more guaranteed to hit the thing you want to hit. Damage, of course, quite a bit down. Okay. Yeah, makes sense. Apparently on PvE, this was at 5%, and people were just going Titanic Jason. He's just destroying things with his like 5 instant autos, and yeah, that makes sense. Zephyr's now unique. You can't put 2 in the same unit. That's too bad. I kind of enjoyed that, but that's okay. Then you got to move every unit individually. Sure, whatever. Okay. Their movement speed's now correct at the start of the game. That's good. So ranges focus, yeah, now properly grants 100% extra attack speed. My understanding is the way it worked is it kind of only granted attack speed based on your base attack speed, but not based on your items. So it didn't really give you the full speed you were supposed to get. The way it worked is if it triggered and then triggered again, it was like, your base attack speed is 1.3. Here's another 1.3. And you're like, whoa, okay, hold on. This ultimately ends up being I would say, a meaningful buff to Ranger 2 and a meaningful nerf to Ranger 4. If and when it chain triggered. Essentially, Ranger 2 is very unlikely to chain trigger. Ranger 4 was actually fairly likely to. That if you trigger the first time, it was probably going to trigger again the second time because your odds are over 50%. You are more likely than not to get a second buff, which means you're going to go into bonkers attack speed territory. So ultimately ends up being a nerf to 4. And because it now works properly, it's a buff to Ranger 2. And specifically a buff to the Rangers that had items on them. Kindred was never going to notice this because you didn't put attack speed on Kindred. You gave her some Sapphire Crystals and called it a day. Called it a day. No longer healing, that's good, cool. Matchmaking next that's great. Lucian's ability range now, that's nice. So Lucian's ability now works at Rapid Fire Cannon. And here's the big thing. Shout out to me, by the way. I'm the reason this bug got fixed. And shout out to the designers on TFT. I got a tweet after 9.18's patch rundown came out where it was like, I'm pretty sure TFT Elite Spiderlings are bugged. I got a tweet. It's like, I looked at it. Yeah, they're reading the wrong file. Elite Spiderlings were indeed bugged. So you know what's buffed to Elite Spiderlings? They never did anything. This bug fix roughly doubles the damage of Elite Spiderlings. This is a really big deal. This is a really, really, really big deal. If you want Freelo, my viewers, I'm gifting you this. Play Elise. Get her to transform and let her spiders destroy your opponents. Play Elise. This is a big deal. Patch 9.19 TLDR, let's get into it. Kaisa is a triple carry class. Void and Ranger and Assassin are all DPS increases, which is good because you don't get 3 stars of any 5-drop ever. These are pretty good stats. They are good enough to certainly be worth running at 2-star. And with these 3 carry classes coming in, she's going to feel pretty good. Kaisa's going to look really cool. She's going to feel really good. She's going to do really good damage. Sparring Gloves overall, 10% crit strike chance, which becomes 20% crit strike chance when you have an offensive item, is not good DPS unless you're Assassin 6. 20% dodge chance, though, is amazing. With that in mind, IE is now this build. Repeating Crossbow needs to go on someone frontline, is going to die pretty quickly. Jeweled Gauntlet is mathematically not as good as Death Cap. It's good for assassins with good damage spells like Katarina, that's it. This looks interesting. The buffs are really good. 40% more damage and 40 life on hit are really, really strong. So I expect to see some Hand of Justice. Iceborne Gauntlet seems incredible and is maybe the best item in the patch. Quicksilver is really, really good. Trap Claw is, I would argue, better. I will take the spell shield that stuns you back over the maybe I cleanse twice because you probably get enough done during this, but maybe I'm wrong. Thief's Gloves is my favorite item of this update and seems really exciting. Put one on every champion. They all get items. Mittens makes things Yordle, so now we're going to see Yordle comps all the time. Deathblade I think is horribly weak, but gives you extra attack damage. You get takedowns. Giant Slayer seems really hype. It's this is worth 76 attack damage on average, which makes it the best item in the game for raw DPS. Bit less damage done overall. The data table is this. Here you go. All 2 drops and 3-starred 1 and 3 drops. Mystery Box give a bit less gold, but you don't get 4 drops during the first rounds. Good stuff. Dragons take 50% more magic damage than before, but for 50% more of nothing is still almost nothing. You will probably start to feel damage here. Dragon's Claw has the same nerf. You're going to feel that one less because the 40 MR is still going to do a lot of heavy lifting. Glacial, generally weaker. Void now works the exact same way as Imperial. It's also weaker than Imperial. Imperial is a better buff than Void. But it has Kaisa, and Kaisa's maybe a better carry than Draven, so get ready for Void. Also, you have more options, and I would say the Void units are better than Imperial's units. Generally, yeah. Yordle weaker at 3, which is a good choice. At 9 is going to be almost impossible, but whatever. Assassins do slightly less damage. Here is the Assassin's math, 5% less at Assassin 6. Only thing that matters. So Assassin 6 does 5% less damage. Ninjas are better at Ninja 4, which is good because no one wanted to do Ninja 4. Noble's slightly stronger. Shapeshifter worse at 6, but that wasn't the common build. You just saw it sometimes. Ranger is weaker at 2, better at 4. Well, sorry, I take that back. Nerfed at 2, the same at 4. There's a bug fix we'll read on later on that changes what that actually means. Champions, Anivia, more health, more attack speed, better spell mana. Now it actually targets the enemy carry, which is a very big change. Anivia, the CC goddess, we'll see if it happens. Cassian gets massively destroyed on his damage output, but gets more armor for durability and more mana steal and mana shield, which makes him a tank Sork, which I really like. I really like playing. I like trying to play 6 Sork, but the problem is the frontline's so rough. Cassian's going to help you cover that a bit better. He was already frontline, now he's better frontline. Misfortune. More health, more attack speed, way worse mana curve because her damage is going up and she's now targeting the furthest target. So she's now differentiated by Radiant Soul by her ult not going on for a very, very long time. She's limited to 10 mana per auto attack without Demon or Sork bonus. So give her Yumi, give her Darken, and go to town. Mordekaiser getting real spell damage. Tristana getting some real spell damage. Cool to see. This always excites me, seeing bad champions get big buffs. This is now damage I care about, finally. Blitzcrank, also more damage, 150, 150. Braum less shields, Rex less attack speed. There's one of the Void nerfs, much like Cassidon Void nerf. There we go. Ashe less stuns, Katarina, even more reason to invest in Katarina. That's kind of hype, in my opinion. 2-star Cat doing 1/6 more damage is pretty meaningful. Shyvana less burn. We already saw the Dragon nerf and the Shapeshifter nerf. Veigar more spell damage. We're going to see some Yordles here for sure. Vi more health. Vi more spell damage. Volibear more health. Volibear is overall a DPS increase and a transform speed increase. So we're seeing Brawler buffs. We're seeing Hex Tech buffs. So those comps are coming back. Big giant buff to Akali, so if you're playing Ninja 1, you might pick her over Zed. You might play Ninja 4 with this buff plus the Ninja buff from up here. Nor health down, Nar transform health down, plus the Shapeshifter nurse. Keep in mind we're going to see more Yordle, so we kind of need this anyway because we're going to see Girdle 3 more often. Jinx more attack speed, more Hextech buffs, right? More Gunslinger buffs with things like Giant Slayer existing. Kindred attack speed up by about 8% exists. Ability duration is weaker. This is overall a DPS increase. The spell comes off soon. It's just not quite as good. I will take this. This feels like a buff to me. Sejuani health down a little bit. Stun duration down at rank 2. Good to see that happen. Think it needed to happen. Good change there. Swain, quite a bit less damage, a little bit less healing. Yasuo a bit more health. Again, another Shapeshifter nerf. Another Yasuo buff, right? Like a lot of kind of shakeups here in the 5 drops, right? MF is better, Anivia is better, and Yasuo is better, and Swain's worse. And Pantheon's worse because Dragon's weaker. Big shakeup there. There's the Dragon Splinter we talked about. Frozen Heart, even better now. Right, really good against auto attack carries, really good against just CCing mages who need to auto attack to gain mana. As we talked about, IE a bit weaker. Rapid Fire Cannon no longer has dodge piercing. It's only on 4 wild now. We might really be seeing people holding on a lot to early Nidalees and stuff and Warwicks and keeping the Wild Dream alive potentially, because if you're in top 3 and you're all level 8, you're not going to see Nidalee and Warwick very much. And yet you need at least one of them for Wild 4. So that's going to be interesting. We'll see how that goes. You've either got to be Sork or hold Wilds. Otherwise, you're going to have a hard time against Yordles. We'll see. It's going to be really meta warping. Consistency upgrade to Titanic Hydra, but much less damage. Should still be decent, I feel like. This is what I was going to talk about. So Ranger's Focus. Essentially, if you had items in your Ranger, you didn't get as much attack as you thought you would. Which means your stacked Ranger is better now because it properly applies on all things. The downside is it used to stack on itself, which means if you were Ranger 4, odds were higher than not that after your first Ranger buff, you would get your second Ranger buff, which means then you were in bonkers territory. So Ranger 4 through this change gets nerfed. Through this change, though, Ranger with items got buffed. So Kindred, for example, is not getting any better with these changes because you didn't really usually put your shivs on Kindred. They have more attack speed because Kindred got buffed, but ultimately this, I would say, is overall a nerf to Ranger 4. Matchmaking less streaky. Shyvana no longer says it prevents healing because it doesn't, I guess. Lucian's spell now works with Rapid Fire Cannon, which is cool. And then here's a big thing. Elite Spiderlings were bugged to do roughly half the damage on the tooltip. So this is the biggest buff, as there's hair in my mouth. This is the single biggest buff that Elise has ever gotten. This is a very, 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 very big deal. Play Elise, she's going to be good. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.